Economics is that foundation, but prior to economics, it comes from the mindset. In order to even get to a place where we're discussing economics, where we're discussing how can we mobilize our resources and our wealth and time, we first have to recognize that there is not only a need to do so, which most of us do, but then how?
Welcome back to another episode of Road to Freedom, brought to you by Foundation of Freedom, where we believe that a value-aligned community plus economic empowerment leads us to liberation. Today's episode is all about power dynamics in capitalism, and more specifically, the ways that economic power influences other aspects of society, like media, education, justice, and even more than that. And what's really good about this episode is we have some familiar faces joining me, and I really want to hone in on some real direct questions today. But first, let's re-meet the guests that we have here. So Lindsay is back, Ryan is back, and Quan is back here. But for those who have not met you before, let's just hear a little bit about you and know a little bit about you right now.
Thank you so much, Dave, for having me back. My name is Lindsay Peel. I am the Chief Wealth Officer at Kingdom Vision Consulting. We are a financial consulting firm specifically focused on personal and business finance for Black and Brown entrepreneurs. It's a pleasure to be back.
Thanks for coming back, man.
Dave, thanks for the conversation. My name is Ryan D. Lawrence. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Seven Foundation, where we really focus on closing the wealth gap, making sure that we're starting to relieve the burden and stress, the pressure that comes with school supplies and things of that nature, as well as wealth literacy. And ultimately, I consider myself to be a Bitcoin advocate, and wealth builder.
My name is Quan Blunt Hill. I'm an assistant professor of criminology and criminal justice at Arizona State University, and also director of research for Foundation of Freedom. I'm very, very excited to be part of this conversation.
Thank you guys for coming back. So excited to see you all once again, and I'm really excited to get into this conversation because it has so much to do with the work that we do here at Foundation of Freedom. Just to share a little bit more about that, one of the most pivotal reference points that we use for the work that we do is this book called Powernomics, written by Claude Anderson. And I actually have a quote from that book that describes a little bit about what Powernomics is. So Dr. Claude Anderson tells us, Powernomics is the ability of Blacks to pool resources and power to produce, distribute, and consume in a way that creates goods. I would like to actually expand upon that a little bit more. Ryan, I feel like you're the perfect person to talk to us and really start this conversation off about Powernomics. Give us your understanding and definition of what that word means to you.
Yeah, when I think about Powernomics, really economic activism comes to mind, right? Because the economic activism is the strategic, that intentional organization of resources that also includes economics. It includes time. It includes the educational pieces. It includes all of those things in a targeted manner that is then going to help us collectively as a group of people to then build the infrastructure that is going to sustain us. And that is going to be that key piece to Powernomics, right? Economics tying into political capital, tying into the social capital that we have, and then most importantly, building us together, right? Community, that common unity. And that's what the role Powernomics plays.
Excellent. Short, sweet, to the point. I want to lean on you a little bit more, though, because, so this is a book, right? Powernomics was written in, I think, the 90s and revised since then. Talk to me a little bit about its relevance today. Like, why might this be a text that we could be looking at, or we should be looking at as a community of Black people right now?
The book is holistic in nature in terms of providing an actual road to freedom. Right? When we think about it, and they lay out a foundational, but they do it more so vertically, thinking about a 5-story building. And not to get too much in detail there, but when we think about it, yes, economics is that foundation, but prior to economics, it comes from the mindset. In order to even get to a place where we're discussing economics, where we're discussing how can we mobilize our resources and our wealth and time, we first have to recognize that there is not only a need to do so, which most of us do, but then how, right? So that how then becomes the foundation for us being able to pull together our resources and then being able to say, hey, we pull together our resources. How do we then leverage this? Well, the leverage part then comes into who am I voting for? What are their policies, right? Whether it is going to be who is your town commissioner, who is on the education board, who is running and governing some of these resources that we need access to for our businesses. Then you ask yourself, hey, when I look at this, is our community safe? So who am I actually voting for that has relevance, that is going to govern the safety that is here, as far as school police officers, resource officers, all of these pieces? And then am I safe when I go to a hospital? Because we know that people that look like us typically value our lives more. And we should not, at this point in time, in today's society, have to worry about more Black mortality rates and women and children than our other counterparts. So we then have to own this full vertical integration. And ultimately, it starts with mindset. It ends with mindset. And then the final piece that we touched on, educational institutions, who and whom is actually educating us.
Wow.
Because not everyone that look like us is going to have those same mindsets, right? We know that we are not a monolith. However, it is up to us to make sure that the education that we need comes through us as examples, so that people that see us can not only know that they can be us, but they can be better.
Wow.
And that's where Powernomics comes in.
It's great. And Ryan, you touched on a lot of really pivotal points that have to do with our everyday lives and the ways that we can move through it and maneuver through it without worrying about all these different, ways that we're held back and oppressed, and Quan, I actually want to start with you and really hone in on a question that I think is a center point for today's conversation. I want to know, how does economic power influence, say, media, justice, education, these really big touch points that affect our everyday lives? How does this power influence these societal structures?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's something to really think about, right? So when you think about how it is that economies are structured, and that our economy, particularly for instance, in the United States, is structured within a political context, right? We talk about the United States as a capitalist country, and so like, what does that mean? And as a country really that's been based on a philosophy of capitalism, there's several iterations or ways that a country might be capitalist, but our particular variation of that has really linked to kind of the core understanding of what capitalism is. So if I just take a few seconds to explain exactly what I mean by that, right? So when we're talking about economic power, we're talking about economies, as you just noted from Dr. Anderson's book, is really the capacity to produce, distribute, and consume goods or services, right? So that's what economy is. And the power part of that is the power to direct what that is and to control what that is, to make decisions about how that distribution, production, consumption occurs. Why is that so important in societies more generally, but certainly in particular in the United States, is that in our form of capitalism, first of all, the definition of a capitalist country is a country in which those means of production, consumption, distribution are in private hands, and that they're expected to be directed for private ends, right? And so in a country in where that is kind of the principle, and particularly in the United States where that has been really the foremost principle, how is it that that's important? Well, actually because the resource of the media, which is itself a source of distribution of information, or the resource of education, which is a source of let's say general education, general knowledge, right? So media, information, education, general knowledge, right, which are overlapping but not the same thing. Justice itself is by definition really one's ability to acquire the thing that you deserve or expect or reasonably expect, right? What my rights are and the security of that. Even that is a resource that's distributed, right? We determine what those rights are and then who has them and how they can exercise them. So if you think about a country where we believe through the principles of capitalism that the mechanisms and means of distribution should be in private hands, the means of production should be in private hands, even in many cases the means of consumption should be in private hands, then you think, oh, the consumption and distribution and production of information resources, oh yes, it's all privatized. The production, consumption, and distribution of educational goods, if not all privatized, often directed under the notion of supporting a system of privatization. And you go on into justice as well, which itself is increasingly privatized directly. But even our criminal justice systems often being guided by private interests. In fact, if you go back to read Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith, and he has a chapter in there on justice, and he essentially just explains that his view of capitalism, he's seen as a kind of the father of economics, is so that we make sure that you have systems in place to protect property owners from the jealous hordes who may try to take their property. So you understand that that's kind of like the basis on which we were founded as a country, then you understand, okay, well now, if all those production systems are controlled by private individuals, who are those individuals? Particularly if they're directing them for their own private means and interests, which is what capitalism is. What are their interests? Do they align with mine? Do they align with my communities? And we know that media, justice systems, education systems have not been under the control of Black communities, usually not Black people, meaning that oftentimes, unless your interests merely converge by happenstance with those in power, usually those systems have not been directed to our benefit. So what does that mean? The entire society now is structured to fulfill the interests or the goals of people who don't necessarily have my interests or goals at heart.
So privatized entities, privatized businesses, privatized interests. So us as Black people sitting at home who might be tuning into, say, MSNBC, CNN, or even, signing into YouTube, what might that mean as we try to understand the either the different narratives or the decisions that one might make, in a media landscape as it relates to, protecting those interests, those private interests?
Yeah, I'm going to try to be simple here and stop me if I'm not, but I would just say that as you're consuming those media resources, understand that someone controls those resources and has determined what to produce, right? What product you have access to, they determine that. So that information that's being presented on that broadcast, someone made a decision to do that. They also decided how you would get it. They decided how it would look, how it would be enticing to you, right? And they've decided to make that available for your consumption and not something else, right? So there's information you don't have access to because someone's decided that you should have this and not that. So understanding what that is, it then becomes really important. Who is this person or these people or that entity? I'm not advocating that you should distrust all media sources, certainly not that. But what I am suggesting is that you should be very educated and intentional about understanding, one, what you can get from those media sources and what you shouldn't, right? I think I watched an earlier episode, a guest said something about like eating the chicken, but getting rid of the bones, right? Understanding that, hey, there's gonna be some sifting that needs to happen in that thing that I consume. And I need to be intentional about not just taking whatever's fed to me, but understanding and being able to differentiate what's good for me and what's not. And if you keep that in mind, and we're just talking about the media at this point, I think that someone who's watching and consuming media resources really needs to be intentional or cognizant of the fact that someone's making decisions about that product.
So being more aware and watching with a keen eye and understanding that behind these decisions, it's not always just a random script. It's not always just a random occurrence going on, but there's probably another set of strategy or schemes or whatever going on that in turn could oppress us economically or otherwise. Okay.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure, just to recast that statement real quick. Not only is it not always, it is almost never neutral and not geared toward a certain interest. And not only is there probably someone behind there almost certainly is someone behind the media products that you're looking at. So like, that's happening, right? Anything that you're watching, someone's deciding you should be watching that now and trying to figure out how to make sure you do watch it. And they have some thoughts about what you will do with that information once you have it. And that's the only reason in most cases that you are watching that thing. Otherwise, they wouldn't have provided it for you.
Got you. Ryan, you wanted to get in there.
Yeah. I just want to throw out the word language, right? And cognitive dissonance that is used in the media. When you go back, there are hosts of words that are used to describe certain groups of people as well as certain actions, right? And that one of the primary examples that we hear when they discuss Black people in certain instances is we are thugs, right? But these other individuals, they are just a little rowdy and they are protesting, they're doing this. But then when it comes to us, there is that flip that happens there.
Actually, or they have mental health issues.
Yep, or they have mental health issues, right? And then we are the ones that then become the person that is on trial even in our absence on this side of the earth, right? I'm going to prosecute this person based upon some of their actions. And that's why the economic power that comes with that can continue to be controlled, right? Even in the midst of a particular news organization being fined in the hundreds of millions of dollars and having to pay that, well, guess what? Part of that programming still continues. A lot of the language is still there. So there are calculated decisions to hold on to certain particular consumer bases and then manipulate. So if I'm able to control your mind and to control your thoughts because we're sitting there and we are consumers and I add an image to these words, now I'm able to control you and we don't even understand, why am I thinking like this?
Totally.
Because in the first place, many of us are not even questioning our thoughts because it has become so normalized. So we have to be mindful, right? And as you mentioned, being aware of those key pieces because as the great one stated here before, money talks.
Sure.
People walk, and then the last piece, it will almost run a marathon. And that's what we have been running in terms of trying to make sure that we secure our future against the backdrop of a lot of manipulation that comes at the hands of those who control the media. If you control the narrative, you control the people.
I want to get in there because there's something there that you're kind of getting to now that's like the more practical piece, you know. And Lindsay, I want to hear from you. I want to pick on you a little bit, and I want to know, for those who come from marginalized communities and are trying to gain more economic power within this capitalist framework. I mean, what's stopping us from just being like, we're at the mercy of the powers that be? We're being socially controlled, and how can communities gain more economic power within this framework that we live in?
So one, I think, is acknowledging everything that they just said. I think sometimes, well, way too often, we don't even have the understanding or the foresight to say that, hey, this is a controlled entity at this point. And we sit here glued to our televisions watching what they're feeding us, and then it literally becomes a part of our everyday life. And we wonder why our communities are the largest consumers. We say that we don't have the money, right? But we do, right? We have trillions of dollars in buying power just as a Black community alone. But it's, where are we putting our dollars? Our money is going into the material things, the clothes, the shoes, the cars, half the things that we can't afford anyway, right? But media has told us, if we look like this, if we have this, then we are that. That has not been the case, right? We're spending our money on substances. I was doing a study not too long ago, and I was looking at the numbers around how much money we spend at liquor stores, right? How much money we spend, right, on just things that honestly does not benefit us.
Were you looking at this for your own personal work, or just like this is your free time? Like what led you to?
So I was actually at a success summit, and it was a financial advisor doing a presentation, and we were talking about really the fear that we have for our communities. Research says within the next 30 years, if nothing changes, the Black community, the majority of us will have a $0 net worth. That is scary, but that is very real if our spending habits do not change. However, we do have the power to change that. We also have to understand that a lot of the methods, the education, right, that we need to be able to garner to make those changes, they're not going to come from the media outlets. They're just not. They're not going to teach us the importance of having banking relationships. They're not going to teach us the importance of having great credit so that you can leverage your lending power. They're not going to teach us the importance of investing, right? But we hear in our families, we need to save, save, save. But what does saving even looks like? Well, like, what does that look like for us when inflation is a real thing, right? And our dollar is depreciating every single day. So we're saving, but next year that money doesn't even buy you the same thing, right? So it's like being able to garner the financial education so that we can make more strategic decisions. But the information isn't going to come from the places that we're spending the most of our time consuming information. That's also why we have to stop being such consumers, right? When we're consuming these things that they are putting out there for us to honestly, to manipulate us, right? It alters our ability to even want to think differently. even down to the music we listen to. Because when we talk about these entities, right, they're the same people who own these record labels, who are controlling these artists who look like us, but are also making sure that the music they are putting out is to our detriment. And we don't think about that, right? We like to hear about shooting this and this whole this and like, but what does that do for our people?
Right.
Realistically speaking.
Well, let me jump in there because I understand that you are a dualpreneur.
Yes.
Not just a monopreneur, right? Like so you work full time and you run your own business.
Yes.
I want because we've been talking about like the media a bit and the communication aspect and the ways that leads to real like social engineering in the ways that we see the world. I want to actually plug in a little bit to maybe the financial part of things. Can you talk to me about, you know, some of the things that you do day to day and how it's connected to helping our communities in cultivating and garnering some of that economic power?
Sure. So my entire life's work is about creating financially safe and sustainable communities for our people. And I say safe and sustainable for a reason, right? Because we need that. It's not often that we even have safe spaces to become our best selves. So a couple of things that I do, right? Because I believe that we're all multifaceted, right? But we have to nurture those various areas. In my company, I specifically work with Black and Brown entrepreneurs, helping them to understand the importance of both personal and business finance. And we focus on 5 key areas of finance known as CLASS: credit worthiness, long-term wealth, asset protection, strategic banking relationships, and strategic asset accumulation. So making sure that Black and Brown entrepreneurs understand the importance of having great personal credit, not just to buy the house, not just to buy the car, but it should be maintained as a principle that we abide by. Being able to build business credit so that we can leverage OPM, other people's money, to build our enterprises. We can't keep bootstrapping our way to success, right? It just does not work, right? But also making sure that we're thinking about long-term wealth. Are we planning for retirement? Most entrepreneurs do not. We might cash out their 401k to start this business, but then we're never resaving that money again. We're not understanding the importance of investing again for the long term. And then we become a burden on our children once we get to retirement age because Social Security isn't enough. And when you're an entrepreneur and you're not putting money into the system, right, there is no money for you to get out on the other end of that. But also, asset protection, right? Making sure that in our communities, we understand the importance of having proper insurance, right? Most of us are not thinking about what happens when we close our eyes for the last time, what happens to our family. So having proper life insurance, having proper business insurance. Are we even estate planning? Do we have a will? Do we have a trust? Do we have health directives? Do we have a POA in place? A lot of times we don't. And we're leaving our assets up to the decision of the state, right? And now we're leaving all these things in probate, and it just creates a disruption in our families, especially when it comes to grandma fought 50 years to keep that house. And now we didn't pay the taxes, right? But grandma didn't get her will taken care of. She didn't have that trust, and now we lost it, right?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I'm hearing, you know, within the context of what you're sharing is not only the importance of being able to build something over time, but just the principle of being able to invest in something in general, whether it be yourself or something that's going to grow over time. So talk to us. Assume I don't know anything about investing, the importance of it. Give me a quick little crash course. Like why is investing necessary as it relates to really garnering that, you know, economic power in our community?
So the very simplest way that I can put investing is being able to put an asset in something with an expectation of there being a return.
Asset meaning?
An asset could be mostly financials in this point. So if you have liquid assets, liquid cash, right, in the bank, instead of just saving that money in a savings account where you're going to earn 0.001% interest on that, maybe putting that money into a stock market, right? So buying shares, a stock or of a company, putting them into some mutual funds, right, the S&P 500. Or I always tell my clients, we diversify our portfolios around here. Yes, we want to put money into the stock market, but are we also investing in real estate? Not everybody want to have the same level of involvement in that, right? Some people want to be landlords, some people don't. Some people just want to be investors and put their money into projects and just get the return if things work out right on the back end. Or some people say, you know what, I don't even want my funds involved in any type of physical real estate. And then we go back to the stock market where REITs come into play, real estate investment trusts. So there's so many levels of investment, even in businesses. We can all be investors in somebody else's business, right? But the hope and the goal is that there's going to be a return. However, when it comes to investing, returns are not guaranteed, right? So people fear the volatility of the stock market, which is a lot of times why people don't invest at all. People don't understand that you can invest in real estate because America just sold us this dream, just buy your house and that's it, right? That is not the American dream, right? Yes, it is great to own your primary residence, but what else, right? Do you also have to diversify that portfolio?
Well, okay, so this is great. I'm learning, and I hope others are learning too. One of the things I'm wondering is if we're thinking about investing, would you say that there's a certain sort of, like, imagine I'm just an individual, right? And I'm trying to think about being a little bit more savvy, but also a little bit more economically empowered, right?
Yeah.
Is there a certain tier list that you kind of think about when it comes to, what we're investing in, right? Like, so I just opened up my 403B, working in a nonprofit. So I just opened up my 403B the other day, and I'm thinking about that as an investment strategy versus, maybe I want to learn stock options, or maybe I want to get into this. Like, lay the land a little bit for me as it relates to what are some of the essential sort of investment strategies that we all maybe should be thinking about.
Well, one, I'm not a licensed financial advisor,
enough.
right?
Yep.
So we
We
have
say
to be
that.
very
We will say
intentional
that.
about
We
that
understand
because that is a whole specialty in finance, and people get their Series 6, 66, 7. Like, there's a number of licensings and certifications that will qualify someone to be able to give you very tailored advice. However, what I share with my clients is, let's talk about your risk tolerance. Let's talk about what you want your financial portfolio to look like. What are you interested in? Everybody's not interested in the same thing, and that is okay. There are multiple lanes of investment that you can tap into based on what you're comfortable with. So based on that conversation, I would want to learn, what is your tolerance, right? But also, how much time do you have to invest? Investing is also about timing, right? It's about the years, right, that you have to invest when we talk about compound interest and what that looks like from the 5-year mark to the 10-year mark, the 15-year mark, right? So if you're 30, the advice that we give you would not be the same advice that we give to someone who's 50 because your time of investment is going to look completely different. But I say often too, just start somewhere, right? Have a conversation with some type of financial professional. Even if they're not a licensed financial advisor, they can still give you very actionable steps to start, right? But we also have Google College and YouTube University out there that we can tap into as well, right? To get educated. There are so many even apps that you can just really just play with things. You have Acorns, right? You have Robinhood. These are things that you can self-manage. Yes, your 401ks, your 403bs, TSPs, all of those accounts, they're usually managed by a company, right? A broker that your organization brings into your into the fold for you. But it's so many things that's within reach. We just have to be willing to step outside of our comfort zone and learn something that may be a little bit challenging, right? It can be complex depending on the area that you're entering in and what level of education you're seeking in that space.
Wow. Quan, I see you itching over there. Anything you wanna jump in and
was,
share?
was that actually like
No, I'm just
biologically
playing with
showing that? I was really very taken with that, and especially the idea of variability and what the best advice is. I think oftentimes people want to know, okay, how do I invest? What am I supposed to do to make the most money? And there truly is a variation of what works for you depending on what that risk tolerance is. So I know, like, I have friends of mine who are really, really into the stock market. And after a minute, I tried to follow them, and I was like, "Oh, I'm not going to do this. I'm just not going to do this. It's a recipe for me to lose my money because you have to have a certain level of attentiveness, and that's not going to work for me because I'm not as interested in it, and I'm mostly engulfed in my work, and I want to focus on that, right? And so, like, what are the things that could work for me? But the other thing I want to say is that in that variation, one of the things that would be really good for us is more of a philosophical part, I suppose, but like, the more collective we were, right? The more we thought about wealth building as a family unit, then maybe I wouldn't have to be the one who was the expert in the
100%.
in the stock.
Yeah.
I got that brother who really likes that,
1
and
million.
I like make up money and contribute to that, and we all do that. And I'm the one who really likes real estate,
Correct.
so we're all just going to put money to my thing. I'm going to do the real estate thing, and I want to do that, right? And, or there's somebody else who's really into like, oh, they have much greater risk tolerance, so they're going to go ahead and do that. But some of us will also have money, so we can be what many of us are afraid of the risk tolerance, because actually many of us unfortunately don't have a safety net. Right? If it goes wrong,
That's something too.
our lives
You need
fall
to have
apart.
that first. You gotta have that first. I tell clients often, a lot of times you're not ready to invest for real if you don't even have an emergency savings. Because if your tire goes out, right, something happens in your home or whatever the case may be, we don't want you to have to jump into credit card debt because you didn't have to have the liquid cash to take care of those things. So you want to be able to have an emergency savings, right, to take care of your real life. Not saying that you don't put anything in an investment vehicle, because I believe you need to do something, right? It could be small amounts, but you still need to be able to prioritize those savings buckets, because these things are going to happen regardless, especially because with the market or whatever you invest in. I just had a conversation yesterday with a partner who put money into a real estate deal that flopped, right? So now she's just trying to figure out, well, am I going to even get my minimum investment back, right? So no investment is guaranteed, whichever lane you're looking at. Even if you invest in a business flops every day, right? So
1,000,000%.
because investments are not guaranteed, I think that's the scary part for a lot of people. That's why we don't want to. However, we have to make sure that we still have these other things in place. Your investments cannot be the only thing that's going to help you to create wealth. You got to have some very, very tangible things too that you can see and feel and that are guaranteed. One thing that I tell clients, even when it comes to investment accounts, yes, you can have partnerships with brokerages, right, where it's very much so in the market, but there are also some safe investments too. You can have a Roth IRA that is literally a bank IRA where you're literally just earning interest. There is no loss there. There are also some various insurance products that are out there that also allow you to invest in a safe way where you won't lose anything. Your rate of growth just may be a little bit slower than someone else. But again, everybody's financial situation is different. Everybody's financial goals are different. And it's important to at least have that conversation first to figure out where do you best fit within this financial landscape of the world, period.
Hey, I really feel like you're giving us a bit of a financial investing masterclass right now. I mean, I know you're not necessarily licensed to be able to give those things, and we've addressed that. But I definitely appreciate all the things that you're sharing. Ryan, I haven't heard from you in a minute. What's burning? What are you thinking? What are you feeling?
The word volatility keeps coming up there. Risk tolerance, right? But also this idea of risk appetite. And for many within our community, we have a high risk appetite because due to our economic circumstances, we want that one solution that's going to solve everything. And then we do not look to the markets, which if we zoom out, right, that volatility starts to go away. Over a 20-year time period, the S&P 500 has never been negative. But every day we see someone that is going out, that is maybe spending that $1 or $2 on a particular lottery ticket, whatever, with the hope of getting wealthy, getting rich, to be able to buy things, to be able to fulfill themselves. And, we have others, right, that are using substances and abusing those in order to get out of this financial trauma that we have. So it's very important for us, as much as we possibly can, in addition to that safety net, right, that we're building, to say, hey, if I am able to just save $5 a day, if I can go without going to the bodega or to the deli and eating out, right? If I can get that actual brown bag for my meal, what does that look like long term in terms of my ability to actually just put some money into the market? Now, I'm going to address this second piece here, is that we as a people also have been discriminated against, which we know, and that narrative continues to linger based upon who we talk to about our access to the market, right? At one point in time, there was no way for us to be able to purchase what they call fractional shares, right? Like that $5, nope, that's not going to get you anywhere. You at least need 90, 100, right? Mutual funds at one point in time, $1,000, $3,000. So it became one of these things for many that were, this is
Can't even
untangible,
imagine it.
right? You know,
Unimaginable.
yep.
not for us.
I can do this too. I can do that 10. It's for those people, but it is indeed for us. And that is the way that if we take a holistic approach, if we zoom out, if we think long term, and then if we add a little bit of math in there, right, and start to become more objective. Past performance is not indicative of the future, but that probability of you becoming more wealthy over time increases over time if you just simply invest and become a little bit more educated about what we do. It's not as complicated as what social media makes it seem, and it doesn't have to be as risky.
I think that if I may, I think that other cultures have had the luxury, right, to consider investing for the long term versus trying to find that quick solution for tomorrow, right? I was literally just in a summit maybe about a month ago with a financial advisor, and he gave us an example from one of his clients who's a millionaire, and he was setting up his trust funds. And what he told him was that he said, I don't need to add my children as the beneficiaries for this trust fund, right? I want to do that for my grandchildren because my father already had my children as the beneficiaries of his trust fund. That is generational wealth.
Let me pause you right there real fast because of my background, because of the stuff that I know and don't know, I actually can't even really put into words what a trust fund really is. Can you help me out a little bit?
So a trust fund is pretty much a vehicle, right? A financial vehicle that you can put your assets into that makes the transfer of those assets a little bit more seamless, but it also helps you when it comes to transfer taxes. That's like the simplest way to put it. There are various types of trust funds. You literally have trust funds for children, revocable, irrevocable. You have trust funds for people who are disabled, right? So for example, if I need to pass down my home to my child, right? For me, because I know better, I'm going to put my property in the trust fund. So at that point, whenever I pass, I close my eyes for that last time, my child don't have to worry about that home going into probate and the state having to make decisions about that, having collectors coming to say, hey, well, actually, let me put my bid in for that, right? If it's already protected, right, they don't have to worry about that. Someone said to me a couple of years ago, they said, you want to own nothing but control everything. And their theory was literally putting everything in trust funds, right? Your business can be inside of a trust fund.
Wow.
And if we can just add a little bit more to that, right? That word probate keeps coming up. Unfortunately, for most people, right, if they start to really look at the tax structure, and we'll touch on taxes a little bit later, a will is insufficient when you're trying to pass down property and other pieces. It's an asset. You need that trust. What does that do? Going back to that word probate, a will has to be proven. Who benefits from that? The courts, lawyers, right? And there has been research that's shown that anywhere between 30 to 40, even potentially 50% of any accumulated wealth is lost in that transfer process. So when we start to talk about, wealth gaps and all of these additional pieces and powernomics within this capitalistic society, we then have to understand the tax structure and then make sure that whatever our goal is, that we have a vehicle, an investment vehicle that is aligned with facilitating that process in the most tax efficient method, right? As well as doing some other things from a directive perspective. There's this quote that says, from shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. What does that mean, Ryan? We've talked about that word probate that has come up a lot, right? And for most people, they hear the word will and they think, hey, if I have this property or I have this car, the will is it. But for many people, based upon their state and everything like that, a will is not beneficial. Why? Because the will has to be proven. What does that mean? That means that lawyers, fees, courts, all those things. What happens in reality? If you have a will, during that transfer process, during that proving process, most families lose about 30 to 50% of that wealth that would have been transferred.
I have seen that to be true because you can use the assets inside of that estate of that person who passed to pay for those lawyer
To pay
fees,
for
to
those
pay
fees,
for that. So
absolutely.
that's why the money, literally, I've seen it happen where families will lose half of what was supposed to be passed down from just fighting in the court.
Yep.
Man, there's a lot here that I'm taking in, and I'm churning, and it's helping me to understand a little bit more about these power dynamics, right? Like the transference of wealth and how that might be lost, but even just our ability to play that game of investing. Like I loved how you said that investment appetite. Like our backs are against the wall. We understand that there's no safety net, so of course we want to go balls to the walls. Of course we want to go to the moon. Quan, actually, I've heard from you in a little bit, and I want to know. Can you speak to us a little bit about how investing in our community can help us be a little bit more relevant in the economy that we live in, and actually be able to play that game that we're all living in? Quan, I want to go back to you. And so we've already talked a little bit about the ways that investing allows us to accumulate more of this economic power. But something I'm trying to learn a little bit more about is how does that economic power translate to us being more relevant in today's economy?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. Sorry, if I can, real quick, I just want to go back on that trust conversation, a real quick soundbite, which is to say that from a conceptual kind of legal standpoint, trusts are made up of relationships between three entities, right? There's a trustee, a trustor, and a beneficiary, right? And so in probate court, what happens is you're the trustor, you're the person who's trying to give something to someone, and you want this person who gets it, that person is the beneficiary, you want them to get it all. Someone, because you're no longer able to do that, maybe you've passed on that responsibility to someone, you have to trust to get them that benefit, right? So you're the trustor, you have this beneficiary, and you need to figure out who's going to be the trustee, the person that you trust to do that. If you leave it up to probate, you are trusting the state.
Yep.
In a trust, you can assign who that trustee is, right? You can assign who's going to be the executor of that estate. Who is the person that you trust to ensure that that beneficiary gets the benefit of what you leave to them. So that's another, just coming from a legal and kind of conceptual standpoint, aside from all the tax advantages and like that's also a really important reason why you should be looking at trust. And in fact, I have myself for my goddaughter. One of the things that Dr. Anderson's book talks about is like the translation of power in a financial realm into political power, social power, community well-being power, and the translation of that back. So you asked the question, how is it that economic power can make us more relevant? First of all, in the economy, but I would say actually even societally, right? So economic power and ability to move economic products and determine the distribution of those products, even to influence the consumption of those products, like the more of that power we have will help shape the economy in this country where the economy is so important. So what does that look like in real life? Yeah, the more that we are in charge of our consumption choices, the more people in charge of production have to meet those consumptive demands. Oh, but the more that we're in control of the means of production, the more we can give people and entice people to consume the things we want them to consume. The more we control those processes of distribution, the more we are able to determine what producers are connected to what consumers, or if they're connected at all. All that translates to what is available in the economy. So if you're looking at the economy, you're seeing there's not the products in the market in my own community that I need. Yeah, take control of the means of production and produce that thing. Take control of the means of distribution and be like, hey, there's some other Black community blocks from now, they have the product that we need here. I'm going to get that product to us. Take control of the consumption and say, hey, I'm going to educate my neighbors and stuff. We're not going to buy this product. We're going to force them to give us this other product by giving our business to this other business that listens to us. Maybe that'll teach the other businesses the lesson, right? So these are ways that you translate and change that economy. That said, economic power translates into other forms of power. So the more you have that economic power, the more you can say, hey, not only do we want these businesses to be responsive to us, I want our political leaders to be responsive to us too. So now we're all going to get together and we're going to make sure that we vote in certain ways. But we also want those political leaders to take our economic interests into account. So I want them to have the rules and the regulations that will make the types of economies that we want, that will protect us in the way that we want, but will also support the products that we need. I want social capital too. And remember that economic power translates, that political power too, translates to social capital, right? It translates to my ability to just have a good relationship to you is enhanced by my ability to go out with you and have a drink without having to worry about how I'm going to pay for it. right? To go out and travel to your neighborhood so that, like, if you live in Bed-Stuy and I live in the Bronx, I can afford to get there. Maybe I'll take an Uber because I'm not going to spend the hour and a half on the train, right? And I think we heard from guests in some other episodes that, like, we should definitely be intentional about how many Ubers we take. But you have the ability to make those decisions. I have the ability. It translates into those social relationships that if you have an idea and a passion, and all you need is a certain level of investment that you yourself do not have control of. If I have the economic ability to do that, I have the ability not just to invest in you so that you give me a return, but to invest in you so that you live true to your dreams and like what you want. And that creates a social capital between us that if we share it between all of us gets to this kind of general community well-being, right? We become much more connected, much more able to collectively determine the lives that we want and to control what happens within the bounds of our communities. In fact, by the way, I mean, and I know we talked some about the ways that communities relate to each other. We certainly don't necessarily want to have an environment where through, say, integration or some other things, we become dependent on communities outside of us. But we certainly can embrace an environment where other communities become interdependent with us. Hey, we might still, there are definitely going to be some goods and services and talents that exist in communities outside of ours that we want to be able to make use to. That's how all, great empires happen. I mean, we look at, say, white culture as like having developed almost on its own. It hadn't. It actually incorporated things from lots of other cultures. Right. That's how a group of people get stronger. But we also have enough to sustain ourselves and enough so that we are valuable to those other communities. You won't suppress us because you need what we have to offer. Right. They actually have that already, right? It's just that through our ability to collectively come together and have the political power to protect our own interests, we will make sure that when they extract what they have always extracted from us, they actually pay a price and a cost for it. Right? They at least compensate us in some way. Wow. And I think that having the economic ability to move economies, but also to move other aspects of society and human behavior are the ways that we bring ourselves from a place of marginalization into a place of self-determination.
Wow.
Come on.
We going to
that's a fact.
Is that the end of the episode? Because he just slayed
hey, Jesus. Come on. Yeah.
Wow. So it above all, at least for me, allows me to envision a world where we have a lot more, not only social influence, economic influence, but the ability to live a life that is joyful and without all the different stress and pressure that is on our back. Like, not only being able to go from the Bronx to Brooklyn without worrying about, am I going to be able to eat tomorrow, but being able to do that and walk through that world without feeling all of the taxes that come along with this flesh that I have. We're getting closer to the end of this episode, but I want to go back to something you mentioned, Ryan. I understand you're a proponent and a real supporter of Bitcoin.
Yes. If I can't add this, just to add one word to the conversation as well. That word is prosumer, Prosumer. What does that mean? That means that I am both a producer and a consumer. And if we can develop infrastructure within our own community to circulate our own dollars in a clear and efficient manner, then we are building that wealth, right? We're building that wealth because we control the supply chain. We control the people in terms of our ability to form those relationships. You have to go to that neighborhood, right? We consider it to be freedom technology. Why? Because we are now able to have this currency that is controlled by rules and code and less about people, as well as ways for us to be able to send remittances, right? In which we know that there's a huge market in which individuals that are in the U.S. that may have family abroad, they are spending an exorbitant amount of money in fees, as well as you have the limitation of time, right? Bitcoin and cryptocurrency as a whole in that regard can really cut through some of these systems and things. But I would really say Bitcoin in general because of the fact that most cryptocurrencies are controlled by individuals, right? The media may not necessarily say it, but on the backside, just keeping it hot, if you will, right? Like the developers and their communities and all of these things, there may be an economic incentive that is there. With Bitcoin, we don't know who started it per se, but the code is law. And that is one of the key pieces that is powerful. It also goes back to this economic principle called hard money in terms of the fact that, yes, there is inflation, but it is highly controlled. And it doesn't matter what happens in terms of our economy. It is what it is. So there's that finite, limited supply that is on a schedule. And for our people in particular, that can be a powerful way outside of the volatility to make sure that we're getting to something that is now considered to be more so a commodity, right? Just a couple of days ago, they actually passed 11 ETFs that came to market that are for Bitcoin. And what is an ETF? Is a exchange traded fund. Typically, those things are viewed as baskets of goods, if you will, that give you access, exposure to those things. But with Bitcoin ETFs currently, it's just like some of the gold ETFs, it's just Bitcoin. That is it. So that's another avenue for some people again, but they have to decide, what is my goal? Because not everything is for everyone at all times. And as it relates to us closing that wealth gap and being able to leverage some of that technology, yes, it has been the best performing asset historically, right, in all of history. But it is really the technology to have programmable money that is not going to discriminate against you based on your zip code. It doesn't know and it doesn't care. And that's the beauty of the protocol. So I would encourage people to really look at the protocol itself and not so much of the price, because price is what you pay, but value is what you get.
Wow. I think that's a great place to Sorry. Okay. Wow, I think that's a really great place to land. I mean, there's a breadth of knowledge and expertise and experience shared here today. I mean, like, you know, we're again talking about these power dynamics in capitalist society and understanding how we can transfer wealth and pool our resources and grow those resources into something that's going to make just a better world for all of us Black people and a more enriched community. Quan, Ryan, Lindsay, so great to have you back on the show. That's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for spending your time and tuning in. If you want to learn more about Foundation of Freedom and possibly get involved, visit ofreedom.org. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.